Today I would like to read chapter 1 from the book Betty by Lillian Turner. The book Betty by Lillian Turner. Chapter 1. A Unideal Today. Betty, Betty, wherever are you? Oh dear, said Betty, and her eyes went distressedly over her paper-strewn table. Why can't I be left alone? Without replying, she bent over her writing again, and the worried lines went away from her forehead. The absorbed look returned to her face. Betty, oh Betty, do come. But Betty did not move. She just closed her ears to the cry and went deeper and deeper into her work, the work she loved, the work that made her pulses tingle and her cheeks burn, that lifted her into all the glories and beauties of another world, away from the troubles and petty cares of this threadbare, everyday one. And now there was that old cry, beating all over the house. Betty, oh Betty, do come. I won't go, said Betty angrily. I can have an hour of my own life to do as I like with. The door handle turned, and a small girl in a shabby cotton frock peeped into the room, a little girl with wonderful hazel eyes and a tumbled mass of golden hair. Oh, Betty, she said, oh, Betty, there you are. I've been calling everywhere for you. Dick, Betty waved her hand wildly. I know, she said. Dick has smashed his nose, or yours, or Pepper's, and I don't care. Why do you come to me every time these things happen? But Dick has not broken his nose, said the little girl earnestly. Go away, commanded Betty, and her eyes were fierce. But the child stood still. Her rosebud mouth was twitching, her eyes were beaming, and her cheeks were scarlet. She was trying very hard not to burst into a storm of tears. Dick won't give Pepper his train, she said, and Pepper scratched Dick's cheek. So when Dick hit Pepper very hard, and now they're both crying, and I can't stop them. Oh dear, said Betty, sighing. She gathered together the loose sheets of her writing and put the soap dish on them. I suppose I'll have to come. It's no matter what I'm doing. I must be at the beck and call of everyone. No one ever considers me. The last sentence was only muttered. Indeed, most of her words were, but the waiting child caught much of her speech and saw her frowning forehead and angry eyes. In the kitchen, Betty dear, said the child. I don't believe Dick could help it, because Pepper was wanting everything he got. And it wasn't quite Pepper's fault, because Dick had really gotten one of the carriages of his train, and, oh, be quiet, do, ordered Betty impatiently. I am tired of all of you. One of these days I'll run away, and I'll never come back any more. After which fearful threat she angrily pushed the child in front of her and went out of the room, slamming the door behind her, down the narrow passageways, and she went into the wider one, stepping briskly, her head up, her eyes indignant. A whole dictionary of hot words was running riot in her mind. But perhaps they were too chaotic to put into speech, for when they reached the dining room door, she only pressed her lips together and turned an angry face to the room. 4-year-old Dick was pushing his big book, and a smaller one steadily upon the line on the linoleum, the pattern being so marked as to allow an unlimited supply of railway lines. Under the table, Pepper was lying on his side, disconsolately working a solitary coverless book up and down, sobbing "Too, too, too," as he worked. They're not crying, said Betty, turning angrily upon the little girl. What do you mean by coming and disturbing me for nothing, Joan? Oh, said Joan, they were screaming ever so, and I couldn't stop them. Too, 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 sobbed Pepper. Dick raised his serene face and a pair of tear-wet blue eyes. Pepper wanted my tender, he said, and my line, and my engine. Pepper continued his solitary game, sobbingly attempting a whistle. Come here, Pepper, ordered Betty. but he took no notice. He knew very well what a big elder sister of his looked like when that tone was in her voice. "Come here, Dick, and come here, Pepper, at once." Dick looked at Betty, gathering up his books, and went towards her. "Every time I do get my passengers into my train, Pepper takes my tender," he said, and his wet eyes were eloquent. "And he takes my Catacumba station, and my Sydney station, and my Stratfield station." Two shades of blackness faded from Betty's face. One of her arms went around the little injured boy. "Come here, Pepper," she said softly. "Come, darling." He came instantly then, hugging his book and sobbing into a broken way. The next minute he was in Betty's arms, and her cheek was wet with tears. Joan climbed onto the back of the chair, and her little arms went around her sister's neck. And so that the foreheads were all together close, and Betty seemed to be kissing all three faces at once. "It's dreadful when you go away, Betty," whispered Joan. "Darling, dear Betty." "Now, was it fair of Pepper?" queried Dick, stroking her cheek. "Want all the puffers," sobbed Pepper, clinging closer. For a space Betty just gave out comfort. "Poor little Joan," she said. "I won't write any more today. I'll be your very own Betty." "No, my precious Dick, Pepper is a little cheat. He oughtn't take your puffers and your stations." "There, Pepper, darling, Betty will make you a beautiful train and 3 stations. And yes, a tender and 4 tracks." Then, when calmness came and Dick and Pepper had kissed each other and examined each other's trains in quite a friendly spirit, Betty proceeded to inculcate wisdom after her fashion. "Dick, you mustn't worry. You mustn't forget how very old you are," she said. "You are growing a big, big boy." Dick held back his head and smiled beamingly upon his little brother. "4 is very old," continued Betty, "and you should be gentle with Pepper and help him to make his trains, because he is only 3, and I'm sure you could build him a few nice stations. You're so good at stations." And then she looked at Pepper, and her eyes grew still softer. "And Pepper must never take Dick's things because, well, that isn't fair. And if Pepper isn't fair, well, then you'll have to give up playing trains altogether. Wouldn't that be dreadful? Now let us make some more stations." In a little while the wrong was righted, and Dick had 2 lengthy trains playing between 3 stations, and Pepper had 2 trains were just as lengthy, and so deftly did Betty arrange the quarrel that they ran their tracks upon adjoining lines and used the same stations, making the game even the keener. "Dear Dick," said Pepper in a burst of enthusiasm, kissing his brother, as they paused at Stratford to allow their passengers to alight. "Poor little Pepper," said Dick benevolently, turning him the kiss. Betty turned away. Her manuscript was in her room, and she had promised to write no more today. Her eyes fell upon her little sister's face. "Joan will help me," she said. "We'll make everything nice for Daddy, and fresh flowers will be in the vases, and we'll make the table pretty." A sudden feeling of virtue swept over her. "Where are the vases?" asked Joan. "Ah," said Betty, and a little cloud came over the new brightness of her face. "We've forgotten all about flowers and prettiness for weeks, haven't we? Never mind, we'll make up for weeks and weeks of tomorrows." "Oh, Betty," said Joan rapturously, "may I get any flowers that I like, whatever color?" "Yeah, just what you like," said Betty. "Take a basket and the kitchen scissors, and then I'll wash the vases." Life to Betty was very troublesome, disorderly affair, and a perpetual striving to make the path of beauty, the path of duty, identical. A year ago, when she was little more than 16, she had been brought suddenly home from school, her elder daughter, to be elder daughter to her eloquent, delicate mother. There was Dorothea, pretty, graceful Dorothea, who was 4 years older than Betty, but no one for an instant considered sending for her. To begin with, Dot had never been a home daughter at all. Until 16, her education and accomplishments had been matters of the first importance with her parents. Dorothea must be finished properly. And there were years and years coming in which to consider the twins, Elizabeth and Cyril. So Dorothea was finished. And like many another daughter, when this mysterious process was completed, when she could play and sing and dance and paint and do fancy things, she was a little too good for her own home. Her mother, who was always weak where Dot was concerned, shrank from immersing her in the routine of life in their weather-board home in the North Sydney bush. She quite leapt at an offer to come shortly after school days had ended for Dot to be companion to one of her schoolmates, and she was a wealthy squatter's daughter. And then Betty was given her chance, but Cyril, her twin, was having his also. So Betty's list of accomplishments was necessarily curtailed. Besides, 2 new members were added to the family in the time, Dick and Gordon, and popularly known as Pepper, because on account of its temper. So Betty had only singing as an extra. Her school career was somewhat curtailed, or somewhat checkered, and at the end she had not a single good conduct prize to put beside Dot's 11, although she certainly invariably carried off the essay, English prizes, and 4 times the French. With one consent, it was Betty who was wanted when the dark shadow fell on the small house. There were 4 babies to be cared for when the mother ceased from caring and slipped into the shadowless night, where were neither troubles nor tears. 5-year-old Joan and 3-year-old Dick and Pepper, who was 2, had to be helped over the latter part of his teething troubles, and that terrible, terrible personage, a new baby. But that was all 6 months ago now. The baby had cast aside her long garments and stepped into short babyish dresses and pinafores. And Betty's young shoulders were growing accustomed to their pack. Nancy, the next in age to the twins, was nearly 11 and delicate, and she was only as tall as ordinary child of 7. Her face was white and desperate, the gum tree-laden air, and nearly always wore a peevish frown, and her mouth was thin and quarrelsome. Cyril was kept at school for 6 months longer than Betty. Not that she was clever or qualifying for anything in particular, but just simply because they just didn't know what to do with him. Finally, his father had been able to, upon a payment of a small premium, to article him to a clever young architect. But the family still felt the pinch of that premium. And now we're going to go on to Chapter 2. That was Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is called The Path of Duty. And then stay tuned for Chapter 2 in the book of Betty.